And thank you, Amy. So we're bringing Amy back for some follow-up questions. These are questions that a lot of people in the immigrant community have for immigration attorneys. These are the main questions or the most popular questions that we get. So we're going to go through these, and we're going to have Amy elaborate on an answer, a solution, the type of things that we want to hear when we answer these questions. So welcome back, Amy.
Thank you for having me back.
So the first question. As a green card holder, I have traveled often outside of the U.S. Can I file for citizenship?
Okay, so when you re-enter the United States, it's going to depend on how long you've been gone and whether or not you meet what's called continuous residence requirements and physical presence requirements. Those are two different requirements. So continuous residence requires that no one trip had been longer than 6 months. If it was 6 months or longer, it creates a rebuttable presumption, keyword rebuttable, that you abandoned your permanent residence. 1 year or more, and it creates a presumption, not a rebuttable one, that you abandoned your permanent residence. So that's one requirement that you have to fulfill. So if you have been gone for a year or more, you should see an immigration lawyer and talk about your options. You may have some time before you are going to be eligible to apply to become a U.S. citizen. That's continuous residence. Then there's physical presence. Physical presence requires that half of the time for which you are basing your naturalization application, it's either 3 years or 5 years, for half of that time you have been physically present in the United States. So if you're basing your application on having had your green card for at least 5 years, we have to show that you've been present for half of that time, which is around 912 days. So it actually comes down to that. It's just the way it sounds. We start counting days, the days that you were present in between trips. So that's a general outline of eligibility to apply to become a U.S. citizen if they're a big traveler.
So a lot of people, in my personal experience, hang on the 6-month limit on how long they can be absent from the country and whether that will affect them or not, saying that's not a hard rule on that. It just creates something that you would have to rebut in court.
Right. Frequently what happens is people will leave for 5.5 months,
right,
and then they'll come back. And what's going to happen if you do that is you're running the risk that your Customs and Border Protection officer, when you enter the U.S. at a port of entry, is going to ask you why you're traveling so often, what do you do for a living, where do you reside, what are your ties to the United States, and they do reserve the right to issue a notice a notice to appear, to go in front of an immigration judge, to face the possibility of having your green card revoked. So you should do that. And if you're a big traveler, try and stay in for as long as you can. Become a U.S. citizen, and then you can travel as much as you want.
Excellent. Our next question is, I married a U.S. citizen. Now what? What's the next step? What's the first step? What does that process look like? Okay,
so if you married a U.S. citizen, you may be eligible to become a lawful permanent resident. So the next question we ask, you married a U.S. citizen, where are you located? Are you located in the United States? Are you located in a foreign country? If you're located in the United States, you may be eligible for what's called adjustment of status, and that's where your most recent entry into the United States was a lawful one, and you're married to a U.S. citizen, and it's a real relationship, and you are otherwise admissible to the United States. There's no other grounds of inadmissibility, then you may be eligible for an adjustment of status. If there's other grounds of inadmissibility, you may be eligible for what's called a waiver. So that's one version, and then the other one is if you're a U.S. citizen, but you're located outside the United States. That becomes what's called a consular processing case. And again, you have to be admissible to the United States, and there's a process for that. If you might need a waiver if you're not admissible, provided the ground of inadmissibility is one for which a waiver is available, and the U.S. citizen then files a petition here in the U.S. In order to bring the foreign national over as his or her spouse.
Wow. All right. And another common one has to do with employment. A lot of times people are here, they're employed, whether it is legally or under the table as it's commonly referred. Can my employer sponsor me?
Okay, so I get that question a lot. So if you're in the United States and your visa has expired, or you're undocumented for other reasons, no matter what, you're undocumented. Either your visa expired or you entered without inspection, and you have an employer who wants to sponsor you, you are not going to be able to get your green card while you remain in the United States. So the employer can sponsor you, but you're going to have to consular process. Depending on how much time you have authorized presence in the United States, when you leave, you're going to trigger a bar. You're either going to trigger a 3-year bar or a 10-year bar, for which you're going to need a waiver. In order to have a waiver, this is where it gets interesting. You have an employer who's sponsoring you, but you need a waiver.
Is this a waiver for re-entry?
Yes, okay. To come back in as a lawful permanent resident through an employment-based situation. You have to have a qualifying relative for the waiver. So your employer is sponsoring you, but you need a qualifying relative for that waiver, even though it's not a family-based petition.
That's a separate sponsorship, kind of.
Well, not quite, but it's all part of the same process. So a lot of folks who want their employer to sponsor them, they don't have the requisite family ties for the waiver, because if they did, they would have already gotten their green card through that relationship to begin with. So it gets a little difficult.
Wow. Wow, really?
And another comment I just want to share about that is we're going into H-1B season. So if you have a job offer from an employer and you believe that you may be eligible for an H-1B, it is not too early to get started in the process. The U.S. government has a new process this year for this fiscal year. It's called an H-1B registration process. You have to go on to register the beneficiary. It's $10. Your lawyer can walk you through it. And anyway, it's a new process this year for the H-1B visa. So we're already in January. It's typically filed, if you're CAP subject, it's typically filed by April 1st. And so you need to get started now. The registration process starts March 1st.
Okay, it's a very important date to be cognizant. And one last question. As a green card holder, who can I petition to join me? Okay. Here with who can I petition to get a green card and join me here in the U.S.?
If you're a lawful permanent resident, you can petition for a spouse, an unmarried child under the age of 21, or an unmarried child over the age of 21. If you file the petition as a lawful permanent resident, and then after you file the petition, your beneficiary gets married, they've revoked the petition automatically, because there is no category for the married child of a lawful permanent resident. So I've had to advise clients and say, don't get married, hold off on getting married. So now, if the lawful permanent resident files the petition for their child, and then the lawful permanent resident becomes a U.S. citizen, and then the child gets married, that does not revoke the petition.
Wow. This is a really big, complex topic, isn't it?
Right. So lawful permanent residents do have options. A lawful permanent resident cannot petition for a parent.
Well, thank you, Amy Long, for clarifying some of these for us. Obviously, your experience and adds to your insight and all this valuable advice that you've given us. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Amy
Thank
Long.
you for having me. And please come visit me at my website. It's immigrationfallriver.com.
And your phone number?
It's 508-644-1553, extension 5330.
Thank you, Amy. Thank all of you for joining us. We really hope that you enjoyed the content here. We hope that this adds value. We hope that this is relevant information. Please continue to tune in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.